Hey, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt Show Professor John Palmer, who has taught economics at the University of Western Ontario since 1971. And, well, quite frankly, he caught my eye with an article he had written about Nobel Prize winners and maybe why there's a little bit of a mistake in who gets chosen. So, John, let me start by asking you, who do you think should have won last year's Nobel Prize in economics?
Well, I've written that I thought Richard Posner, who teaches at the University of Chicago Law School and is a judge in Chicago, should have won it because he's the one who sort of, even though Ronald Coase founded the field of law and economics, Richard Posner has really pushed it right out to the extremes, applying economics to so many different areas. I've sort of changed my mind a little bit, though. I think Deirdre McCloskey would also be an excellent choice. Her work on bureaucracies and culture and markets and economic history is just fantastic. I would love to see either one of those win the Nobel Prize.
So let's step back a minute and
Okay.
try and figure out why is it important, except that someone gets $1.5 million, why is it important who wins the Nobel Prize? What effect does that have?
That's a good question. It signals, I think, to a lot of people what's important in economics. So when the most recent winner won, it said to everyone, let's step back from all of the mathematical hieroglyphics that we see in so many economics journals and apply some common sense economics. That was a good award that was made recently, and I had no objections to that one. If they award the prize to people who have done nothing but mathematical theoretical models, that's a mistake, I think. It's signaling to people that you don't have to have economics that applies in the real world. You need to, and I'd rather have people like Posner or Deirdre McCloskey win the prize, which both of them apply economics to the real world. They show such a wide array of applications of economics.
Just for those of you who are listening now who want to know who won last year, Angus Deaton actually was one of the winners of the Nobel Prize, and we interviewed him here on the Goldstein on Gelt show. In fact, we had interviewed him even before he won, and a lot of people say that he probably won the prize because he was a guest on the Goldstein on Gelt show. Of course, you can listen to those interviews at goldsteinongelt.com. And John, I simply want to note that now that you've been a guest, I think your odds of winning the prize yourself have greatly increased. I like what you said about bringing the prize beyond just someone figuring out some mathematical model. But do you think that's becoming more and more political? You know, a lot of people feel, for example, the Nobel Peace Prize is just a political push to try to, make some sort of radical change in the world that many, many people may not agree with.
It certainly is a political prize in economics. And to have the prize go to certain people whom I refer to as sort of East Coast liberal interventionist elitists signals one thing, as it did with some of the people who've won recently in recent years. Having Angus Deaton win the prize, I think, is a great shift. I talked with a member who it was someone who was a member of the committee that awarded the Nobel Prize in economics a few years ago, and he told me he was astounded by the number of invitations he got to go to different universities who had people for whom they were campaigning to win the Nobel Prize. It's a very political, highly campaigned process.
So maybe let me be more clear. When I said political, I didn't mean trying to maybe win influence with the Nobel Prize committee. I meant things like granting the Nobel Peace Prize to President Obama before he'd even done anything, or
Yes,
to Yasser Arafat. Right? These are prizes that
yes.
I have to say I I take, well, frankly, I'm surprised about, and maybe even go as
Well,
far as.
I'm more than surprised. I'm upset about any of those prizes.
So everyone assumes the Peace Prize is just one of these kind of prizes that doesn't really mean anything. It's just what the Nobel Committee wants to, when they want to push their agenda. But are you saying that the economics prizes are the same, and maybe we just don't understand it?
To some extent, I think they are. But awarding the prize to Angus Deaton really did switch things around a bit. And a couple of the others switched around too. So it looks to me as if the Nobel Prize in economics is less political than the Nobel Peace Prize.
All right, so I'll be happy with that because at least I feel it's a little more pure. We're talking with John Palmer, who he blogs at Eclecticon, which we'll put a link to that at the show notes a little later today. And he's been teaching economics at the University of Western Ontario since 1971. He's been talking to us a little bit about the background of the Nobel Prize in economics. John, I want to switch gears a little bit because I understand you've joined an organization called Scholars Without Borders. And I think this is an important organization, especially as it relates to BDS. Can you tell us a little bit why you're moving in that direction?
I started writing about these kinds of issues over a decade ago on my blog when people started trying to ban scholars who had anything to do with Israel, and immediately I acquired affiliation with University of Haifa and a couple of other schools in Israel. Even though I've never been to Israel myself, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew where I stood, that I was absolutely opposed to the BDS movement. I see. I have those thoughts for two reasons. One, I really firmly believe in academic freedom, and I think that it doesn't matter who says the things; it's the ideas that count, and we have to deal with ideas, not people. But secondly, as you know from reading my blog, I'm pretty strongly pro-Israel, even though I'm a Gentile and I don't have any strong beliefs about chosen people or any of that. It's just I'm firmly pro-Israel and have been ever since I think probably the mid-50s.
So you used the term banning. Today it's actually a big topic. There have been many books about how there is kind of the stifling of academic discussion on campuses. But hasn't that really always been around? I mean, today maybe people are claiming it's coming from the left, but in the past maybe it came from the right. Isn't that just the way you build up your position? You just shut the other people down.
I think that happens in every discipline. You're absolutely right, and it has happened all through time. Certainly, when I was an undergraduate, academia seemed to be more right wing and the students were more left wing. The students opposed all of that, and we were concerned about freedom of speech. Remember the 1960s freedom of speech movement that came out of Berkeley, California? That was a pretty important movement. Unfortunately, it doesn't stand for freedom of speech anymore. It stands more for just left wing diatribes.
But if you were in charge of deciding, that you have your opinion, and you say, listen, I'm not even interested in the other side because I've already disproven that. Is that being not academically fair, or is that just saying, listen, I'm not going to bring on every view onto campus, so the views that are clearly wrong or that have been proven wrong, no point in hearing them.
That's a dicey issue. I completely agree with you that if somebody came in and said, I want to teach creationism, I would not want to hire that person. But in economics, if someone came in and said, I want to teach 1960s Keynesianism, I would also say, hey, wait a minute, that's been disproven. And a lot of economics departments have had to go through that kind of transition. We don't want to hire people who are still trying to teach stuff that's been proven wrong.
Doesn't Paul Krugman have a job?
Oh, yeah, right. Paul Krugman, built up some pretty darn good credentials 20 years ago. It's just, if you don't, just don't read the stuff he writes in the New York Times, and you're fine.
Yeah, I just heard recently that someone set up a new podcast called the Contra Krugman Podcast. It's just guys, every week they read his article and then they tell you why they think it's wrong. Talk to me a little bit about the BDS movement, but not from a political standpoint, but how is that going to affect the economy, both, let's say, of Israel? And is that a good method in order to affect change? If people want to affect change in Israel, or are they really ultimately hurting themselves through this boycott, divest, and
I've
BDS?
seen, Doug, I have seen very few boycott movements actually succeed. There was one in Chicago when I lived there in the mid 60s when people boycotted Pepsi to get them to hire more blacks. That seemed to work. Um, Probably because there was, I think, a moral rightness on the side of those people as well. But there's so many other boycott movements that haven't seemed to work. And I think the BDS people are just completely screwed up. They don't understand that a lot of the people who are going to get harmed are the workers on the West Bank, the
Mm-hmm.
Palestinian workers. I mean, that's absolutely nuts to try to hurt the people you harm. There were a lot of people who boycotted all kinds of products from South Africa before South Africa got rid of its apartheid. Well, again, they were harming an awful lot of the people there and not really bringing about the change. I think the change came about from a sort of a moral revulsion to apartheid.
Got it. So you're arguing that boycotting on a practical matter may not work, but you know, and therefore it's not worth engaging in.
That's part of it also. And the other thing, though, is I just think they're wrong to want to do this in the first place. They want to boycott people who have sort of immoral positions. Let's start talking about boycotting Iran and Iraq and Saudi Arabia. I mean, my gosh, let's boycott these places that have horrible human rights issues. What about China and Tibet? Let's go after some of these other countries that have done such horrible things compared with what Israel has done. I mean, I may not agree with what Israel does on the West Bank, and I have questions about that. But come on, this is crazy to be boycotting them because of those things compared with what all the other things that are going on that are so wrong in the world.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John. I'm not sure we're allowed to say those things about Iran and Saudi Arabia and China. I mean, after all, they're friends of America. Tell me in the last minute.
I thought you were going to cut me off there and edit this one.
Yeah, we're gonna have to cut that part out because we wouldn't want someone to think that we didn't love Iran and Saudi Arabia and all the rest. But tell me, as we're wrapping up now, you mentioned earlier you consider yourself a supporter of Israel from the Gentile standpoint. Tell me where that comes from.
I think it started because I was one of these left-wing people who wants to support the little guy, the victim. And Israel was certainly the little guy, the victim, until 1967. And from then on, I realized Israel has a democracy. Israel is pro-human rights. Israel is a place where an awful lot of stuff that's really good in the world happens, compared with all of the people who have not been supporting Israel and the people who are fighting Israel and who still want to drive Israel into the sea. It's really hard for me not to support Israel when I think about those things.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for the support and for all the people who are listening. Go, John, go. Of course, I agree exactly with what you're saying, which is why I moved here a couple of decades ago. John, we're just about out of time. We've been talking with John Palmer, a professor of economics. In the last few seconds, just tell us, how can people follow you and follow your work?
Well, there are two ways to follow me. My blog is eclecticon.net. That comes from Eclectic Economist. That's how I came up with that name, Eclecticon. And I'm also on Facebook. And almost everything I write on Facebook is open to the public. John Palmer. You can find me there.
Okay, we will put links to that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. John Palmer, thanks so much for your time.
It was a joy being with you.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.